Some truths are too quiet to be ignored. Sophia wiped the rim of a ceramic coffee cup with precise, almost ritualistic motions, the afternoon sunlight spilling across the worn wooden tables of the corner café. The door chimed softly as Alexander entered, his presence commanding the room without a word. He moved with a measured grace, the glint of his Swiss watch catching the light, a subtle reminder of the world he controlled beyond these walls. Patrons shifted slightly in their seats, sensing the tension without understanding it, while Sophia continued her work, arranging plates and napkins with the calm focus of someone used to being watched but never rushed. Alexander approached the counter, his tailored jacket brushing against the polished wood, and left a slip of paper, a subtle message in the guise of a bill, hoping to provoke a reaction. Sophia's eyes flicked up briefly, noting the gesture with a calm, unflinching gaze, then returned to pouring the next cup of coffee, her movements fluid, her posture a quiet assertion of control. Outside, the rain began to tap lightly against the window panes, a rhythmic accompaniment to the muted strains of a piano playing somewhere in the background, as if the cafe itself were holding its breath. Alexander leaned closer, his voice lowered to a near whisper, words carefully chosen to test her, to see how much influence he could exert with a simple offer disguised as curiosity. Sophia tilted her head slightly, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips, acknowledging the challenge without yielding, her hands moving as if the interaction were nothing more than routine. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air charged, yet serene, as if the world had been compressed into this single moment of silent confrontation. Sophia's steady breathing, the soft clink of spoons against ceramic, the faint smell of roasted coffee beans, all served to underscore the quiet power she wielded without raising her voice. Alexander paused, sensing the imbalance he had underestimated, the veneer of casual authority slipping away in the face of her composed intelligence. A single nod from Sophia, subtle and unassuming, carried more weight than any argument he could muster, a silent counterpoint to his carefully orchestrated pressure. The cafe returned to its rhythm slowly, customers unaware of the invisible chess game played just inches away, and Sophia moved on to the next table, her calm demeanor unbroken, the quiet assertion of her dignity echoing louder than any spoken word. The afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows that intertwined with the soft reflections of the rain on the floor, a tableau of restraint and awareness, a reminder that power often wears the guise of silence rather than noise. The soft patter of rain outside the cafe window blended with the muted hum of conversation, creating a rhythm that seemed to stretch time itself. Sophia moved with deliberate calm, carrying a tray of fresh pastries, her eyes briefly meeting Alexander across the room. He leaned slightly on the counter, a subtle gesture meant to project authority, yet there was a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. Sophia approached the table with a polite nod, setting the tray down with precision, her movements unhurried, her posture conveying quiet confidence. Alexander's voice broke the rhythm, low and measured, asking questions that seemed innocuous on the surface but carried layers of implication, testing her knowledge, her perception, her boundaries. Sophia responded with clarity and composure, her answers brief yet pointed, revealing understanding without revealing vulnerability. The cafe felt smaller, the space between them charged with attention that neither needed to voice aloud. Outside, the rain intensified slightly, tracing patterns down the glass, each drop a subtle metronome to their unspoken dialogue. Sophia's hand lingered on a coffee cup, adjusting its angle as if nothing were amiss, yet the deliberate ease of her gesture drew Alexander's attention, making him aware of the control she wielded through mere presence. A soft chime announced the entrance of a new customer, but even this small disturbance could not break the current between them, Sophia remaining centered, undisturbed, while Alexander adjusted, a shadow of frustration crossing his features as he realized his usual methods held no sway. The light shifted with the clouds outside, dappling the room in fleeting patches of brightness, reflecting in Alexander's polished shoes and the smooth surface of the counter, a visual reminder of the contrast between his outward polish and the quiet fortitude of Sophia. She moved to clear the tray, her steps deliberate, eyes scanning the room, acknowledging patrons with polite nods, yet always returning to the counter, to the presence of Alexander, who watched, measuring, reconsidering. A soft murmur of music from the background piano lent an air of sophistication to the scene, accentuating the subtle dance of power and restraint, the unspoken dialogue of dominance and dignity. Sophia's expression remained serene, a quiet anchor in a room that felt suddenly heavier with awareness, her calm intelligence a mirror to Alexander's own reflection of self, forcing him to pause, to consider, to reckon with a new dynamic he had not anticipated. Each movement, each glance, each small adjustment of a cup or napkin carried weight, a deliberate choreography of composure that contrasted sharply with the carefully maintained image of authority he had brought with him. The café continued its rhythm around them, the rain tapping insistently at the windows. Yet within the eye of this storm, Sophia's quiet power remained absolute, a testament to the subtle, undeniable influence of dignity and intellect when exercised without haste, without noise, without the need for acknowledgement. The hum of the café grew quieter as the afternoon light shifted, casting elongated shadows across the floor, brushing against the polished edges of the tables. Sophia moved to the corner, retrieving a fresh pot of coffee, her movements fluid and precise, the clink of ceramic punctuating the soft background music. Alexander remained near the counter, observing, his eyes tracing her every gesture, noting the effortless grace with which she navigated the space, the subtle authority in her calm. A gust of wind rattled the windows slightly, carrying the faint scent of rain-dampened streets into the room, and for a moment, the café felt suspended, a separate world held together by quiet tension. Sophia set down the pot with a soft tap, her hands steady, her gaze meeting Alexander's for a fleeting moment, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken game unfolding between them. Alexander shifted his weight, the polished leather of his shoes squeaking softly against the tile, a sound that somehow underscored the weight of expectation he carried into this ordinary space. Sophia moved to refill a cup for a customer, her posture upright, deliberate, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. Alexander opened his mouth to speak, choosing words carefully, aiming for influence, for control, yet Sophia's serene composure remained unshaken, a barrier impenetrable not by force, but by sheer quiet strength. The rain intensified, tracing streaks down the glass, each drop catching the light in fleeting sparks, and Sophia's movements seemed to flow with the rhythm, unhurried, unperturbed, a quiet counterpoint to the subtle tension Alexander projected. He leaned closer, his gestures controlled, his tone measured, attempting to elicit a reaction, to test the boundaries, yet each attempt met only with her steady awareness, the calm intelligence in her eyes reflecting back a truth he had not anticipated. The soft piano notes in the background lent a layer of sophistication to the scene, harmonizing with the gentle chaos of the storm outside, each note a reminder that composure could command attention more effectively than any display of power. Sophia's fingers brushed the edge of a napkin, adjusting it with care, a simple act that somehow held significance, a demonstration of mindfulness that contrasted sharply with the calculated poise Alexander exuded. Patrons moved about, unaware of the intricate exchange, their casual chatter forming a muted backdrop to the delicate tension suspended between two individuals in this ordinary yet charged space. Alexander's jaw tightened slightly, an unconscious admission that the game he had intended to dominate was slipping beyond his control, that the quiet patience of Sophia was reshaping the rules in subtle, undeniable ways. Each gesture, each glance, each carefully measured action seemed to carry weight, a choreography of intellect and dignity, illustrating that influence could be asserted without noise, that power could be redefined not through domination but through calm, deliberate presence. The café, the rain, the soft lighting, and the muted piano all merged into a tableau of quiet authority and restrained observation, a space where a single composed individual could command attention and respect without uttering a word, and Alexander found himself both captivated and unsettled by the unspoken mastery Sophia wielded effortlessly. Alexander finally straightened, a subtle exhale betraying his attempt to maintain composure, as Sophia continued her movements with unbroken calm. She approached the counter, gathering empty cups and plates, her hands steady, the gentle tilt of her head suggesting awareness without arrogance. Outside, the rain eased to a soft drizzle, streaking the windows with silver trails that reflected the warm interior light, creating a moving tapestry of calm and observation. Alexander placed his hand briefly on the counter, a silent gesture of hesitation, watching as Sophia arranged napkins with precise symmetry, each motion deliberate and measured. The cafe seemed to shrink around their interaction, the space between them charged yet unspoken, each glance carrying significance, each step a statement of control or acknowledgement. Sophia paused for a moment, looking up, her eyes meeting his with clarity and focus, as if reading not only his intentions but the subtleties of his expression, the shift in his posture, the fleeting tension in his jaw. Alexander attempted a light remark, carefully phrased, seeking reaction, testing her boundaries further, yet Sophia responded with an effortless nod and a soft word, conveying awareness and subtle assertion without needing to elaborate. The faint aroma of brewed coffee mingled with the damp air, grounding the scene in normalcy, contrasting with the extraordinary tension unfolding between them. A single droplet of water ran down the glass, catching the light, and Sophia's gaze followed it, unflinching, serene, a demonstration of focus that seemed almost meditative. Alexander's hand retracted slightly, a tacit acknowledgement that his usual influence had less effect here, that patience and quiet intellect were holding sway over the dynamics he expected to dominate. Sophia moved to refill a sugar container, her motions uninterrupted, her breathing steady, exuding a composed authority that was felt more than spoken. The subtle clink of utensils, the gentle rustle of paper, even the muted conversation of other patrons all faded into the background, leaving the measured exchange between them as the center of the cafe's pulse. Alexander's eyes traced her movements, noting the balance she maintained between attentiveness and autonomy, realizing that the calm, composed presence Sophia embodied was reshaping the environment itself, asserting influence not through words or gestures of power, but through quiet, deliberate action. The light shifted once more with the clouds outside, dappling her hair in a soft glow, highlighting the contours of her face as she moved with grace, each step measured, each glance intentional. The piano melody in the background seemed to echo the tension and resolution of the moment, rising and falling with the cadence of their silent engagement. Patrons continued with their routines, unaware of the subtle recalibration of authority happening nearby, the quiet strength of Sophia resonating more loudly than any overt declaration, as Alexander found himself both captivated and reconsidering, feeling the weight of an unspoken lesson that presence and dignity could command far more than influence imposed through intent alone. The afternoon light softened further, casting a golden hue over the tables and reflecting gently off the polished surfaces. Sophia moved with the rhythm of someone fully present in each moment, her hands carrying a tray of freshly brewed coffee with a grace that seemed almost effortless. Alexander watched from the counter, the glint of his watch catching the light, a subtle reminder of the world outside the cafe where time and influence were his allies. The rain outside slowed to a gentle drizzle, each droplet a delicate percussion against the windows, harmonizing with the soft strains of the piano in the background, creating an atmosphere both serene and charged with unspoken tension. Sophia approached a table, placing the tray down with careful precision, her gaze briefly meeting Alexander's, conveying awareness and quiet control without words. He leaned forward slightly, as if to gauge her reaction, his expression composed yet containing a trace of curiosity, a realization that the usual markers of power might not apply here. Sophia moved to clear a plate, her motions deliberate, her posture upright and poised, signaling confidence and calm authority. Patrons continued their conversations around them, unaware of the subtle exchange unfolding in their midst, their presence adding texture to the space rather than distraction. Alexander adjusted his stance, the polished leather of his shoes whispering against the tile floor, acknowledging through small gestures that his presence alone could not dictate the interaction. Sophia's eyes flicked briefly to the window, following the rain, then returned to her work with a steady rhythm, demonstrating mastery through action, not declaration. The soft scent of coffee mingled with the dampness of the rain, grounding the scene in familiar sensory details while highlighting the extraordinary quiet influence Sophia exerted. Alexander opened his mouth to speak, careful with every word, probing subtly, yet Sophia's composed demeanor and brief, measured responses maintained her equilibrium, guiding the exchange without aggression or confrontation. The café seemed to pulse with the tempo of their silent dialogue, each movement, each glance, each small action carrying weight far beyond the ordinary. Sophia's hand adjusted the sugar container, her attention meticulous, and Alexander recognized, almost reluctantly, that influence here was wielded not by intention but by presence, by careful observation, by the quiet assertion of intelligence and dignity. Light shifted as clouds passed overhead, brushing her hair with gentle highlights, and her small, calm gestures seemed to orchestrate the environment, drawing focus naturally without overt command. Alexander's gaze lingered, a mixture of intrigue and contemplation, noting that the quiet strength Sophia exhibited was more compelling than any outward display of authority, a subtle but undeniable assertion of her own mastery within the room. The soft murmur of the piano, the gentle drip of rain, the ambient hum of patrons, and Sophia's serene, deliberate movements all combined to create a moment of suspended attention, a tableau in which the ordinary and the extraordinary converged, revealing the potency of composure, intellect, and understated control. Sophia paused for a moment, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the counter, eyes lifting to meet Alexander's with a quiet intensity that made him pause and turn. The café seemed to hold its breath, the gentle murmur of conversation and the soft patter of rain outside fading into a muted backdrop, as if the room itself recognized the significance of the moment. She moved with deliberate care, arranging the cups and saucers on the tray, each placement precise, measured, a reflection of her unwavering focus and control. Alexander leaned slightly forward, his posture subtly shifting as he realized that the usual markers of influence he relied upon held little sway here, that the calm authority Sophia exhibited was reshaping the interaction with effortless grace. The light from the overcast sky filtered through the windows, dappling the floor and the edges of the tables, casting a soft glow on Sophia's hair as she adjusted a chair with meticulous attention, the simple gesture radiating composure. A customer approached, asking a question about the menu, and Sophia responded with clarity and warmth, seamlessly integrating attentiveness with quiet command, a balance that seemed to captivate everyone in her presence without a word of overt assertion. Alexander's gaze followed her every movement, noticing the subtle rhythms, the way she anticipated needs before they were spoken, the gentle steadiness of her breathing and the careful modulation of her voice, all combining to form an unspoken lesson in presence and poise. The soft strains of piano music wove through the air, harmonizing with the faint sounds of rain, creating a soundtrack that underscored the subtle power dynamics at play, the interplay between influence and dignity, anticipation and restraint. Sophia moved to replenish the sugar containers, her gestures fluid and unhurried, signaling control through deliberate action rather than declaration, and Alexander recognized the quiet authority she wielded with effortless precision, a form of power that did not demand acknowledgement but could not be ignored. The patrons continued their routines around them, unaware of the delicate tension threading through the room, their normalcy accentuating the extraordinary composure Sophia maintained, a calm presence that both anchored and unsettled the space. Alexander shifted slightly, realizing that each of her actions, however ordinary they seemed, carried intention and quiet assertion, a masterful orchestration of awareness and intellect that subtly rewrote the expectations he had brought with him. Sophia's gaze briefly lifted to the rain-streaked windows, tracing the path of a droplet with an unflinching calm, then returned to her tasks, a single fluid motion that reinforced the equilibrium she maintained. The café's ambient sounds, the light filtering through clouds, and Sophia's composed presence combined to create a moment of clarity, a silent demonstration of how true influence could be exercised through dignity, foresight, and an unshakable calm, leaving Alexander both reflective and profoundly aware of the subtle but undeniable lesson unfolding before him. The rain outside had begun to fade, leaving only gentle streaks across the window panes that caught the waning light of the afternoon. Sophia moved with effortless precision, carrying a small stack of menus to a nearby table, her steps deliberate and measured, each movement a quiet assertion of focus and control. Alexander observed from his place at the counter, the polished edge of his watch catching the subtle light, a reminder of time moving both within and beyond the walls of the café. Patrons continued their quiet conversations, the soft clatter of dishes and cutlery forming a low rhythm. Yet around Sophia and Alexander, the space felt charged, a tension built not on confrontation, but on the careful interplay of awareness and restraint. Sophia paused briefly, her gaze flicking toward Alexander with the faintest of smiles, acknowledging his presence without yielding any trace of vulnerability or concession. Alexander shifted slightly, his posture controlled yet reflecting a dawning awareness that the expected balance of influence was shifting subtly in her favor. Sophia set the menus down, her hands steady, and adjusted a napkin on the table with a small, precise motion, a gesture so ordinary yet imbued with quiet authority, commanding more attention than any overt declaration. The soft piano music continued to fill the space, notes floating in harmony with the muted sounds of rain and conversation, underscoring the tension and rhythm of their silent engagement. Alexander attempted a carefully phrased remark, meant to probe and elicit a response, yet Sophia's calm, measured reply and composed demeanor neutralized any intended leverage, reinforcing the quiet control she maintained. The ambient light shifted again as the sun slipped lower, casting elongated shadows that traced the contours of the room, emphasizing the contrasts between movement and stillness, expectation and composure. Sophia moved to replenish a water carafe, her actions seamless, unhurried, demonstrating mastery not through force, but through deliberate, mindful presence. Alexander's gaze followed her every movement, noting how her quiet intelligence and unshakable calm redefined the dynamics he had anticipated, subtly reshaping the room with her presence. A soft breeze passed through the slightly open door, carrying the faint scent of wet pavement and mingling it with the aroma of roasted coffee beans, adding texture to the sensory landscape of the moment. Sophia returned to the counter, her posture upright, her movements unassuming yet precise, conveying dignity and awareness without a word. Alexander's expression softened, a mixture of respect and contemplation, as he recognized the lesson unfolding before him, the undeniable influence that could be exerted through calm, presence, and measured intellect. The cafe's rhythm resumed, patrons engaged in ordinary routines, while the silent, powerful exchange between Sophia and Alexander lingered, a subtle reminder that authority is not always asserted with words or gestures, but often revealed through quiet confidence and an unwavering sense of self. The cafe seemed suspended in a delicate pause, the last traces of rain reflecting in the glass, shimmering like silver threads along the window panes. Sophia approached the counter with a tray of perfectly arranged pastries, her movements fluid and intentional, each gesture carrying a weight of quiet authority. Alexander's gaze followed her, his brow slightly furrowed, recognizing that every subtle action, every measured glance, was reshaping the balance he thought he controlled. The soft piano notes in the background mingled with the faint murmur of patrons, creating a cadence that echoed the tension and calm flowing between them. Sophia placed the tray with precision, her hands steady, her eyes lifting briefly to meet Alexander's, a silent assertion that nothing was overlooked and nothing could unsettle her poise. He leaned slightly forward, the polished leather of his shoes making a soft squeak on the tile, a minor but telling indication of his presence, of his attempt to gauge and measure her response. Sophia responded with a gentle nod, a subtle smile, not a word needed. Yet the clarity of her intelligence and self-assuredness reverberated louder than any statement he could make. Outside, the light shifted with the passing clouds, illuminating the droplets remaining on the glass, and Sophia's calm movements mirrored the rhythm of the soft weather, unhurried, precise, attentive. Alexander's hand brushed briefly against the counter, a silent acknowledgement that influence here required more than presence. It required understanding, patience, and recognition of the quiet strength in play. Sophia adjusted a sugar packet, folded it neatly, a simple action that carried weight through the precision and care with which she executed it, demonstrating that mastery often lay in composed, intentional action rather than overt declaration. Patrons continued their routines, conversations fading into the background, the subtle, careful interaction between Sophia and Alexander dominating the atmosphere without a single raised voice. The cafe lights reflected off the polished surfaces, casting subtle highlights on Sophia's face and hair, accentuating her calm confidence and the clarity with which she navigated each task. Alexander's eyes lingered, noting each nuance, each deliberate movement, the steady rhythm of her presence commanding respect and attention. Sophia moved to retrieve a fresh coffee pot, her steps smooth, measured, reflecting awareness and self-possession that seemed to extend beyond the immediate task, influencing the space without intention to dominate. The air, tinged with the aroma of brewed coffee and the faint scent of wet streets, seemed to align with the quiet dominance of her composure, as Alexander recognized, slowly but unmistakably, that her calm intelligence dictated the terms of their exchange more effectively than any strategy or test he had attempted. The subtle harmony of the piano, the muted interactions of the patrons, and the light dancing across the interior all combined to reinforce the silent assertion of Sophia's authority, a testament to dignity, awareness, and the unspoken power of presence. Alexander felt a subtle shift within himself, a quiet awareness settling as he watched Sophia navigate the cafe with deliberate ease. The afternoon light now held a warmer tone, filtering softly through the windows, casting elongated patterns across the floor and highlighting the contours of the tables and chairs. Sophia approached a nearby table to refresh a cup of coffee, her movements fluid, composed, each gesture intentional and measured, reflecting a mastery of presence that Alexander had not anticipated. He leaned slightly against the counter, his polished watch catching the light, a visual reminder of the precision and control that defined his usual domain. Yet here it seemed secondary to the understated command Sophia wielded with effortless grace. The gentle patter of residual rain outside mingled with the quiet murmur of patrons and the subtle strains of the piano, creating a serene yet focused atmosphere, a backdrop to the unspoken dialogue unfolding between them. Sophia's eyes met his briefly, a small, confident nod acknowledging the tension, and Alexander recognized the subtle assertion of intellect and calm in her gaze, an influence that did not rely on words or gestures of dominance, but on quiet observation and deliberate action. She moved to adjust a napkin on a nearby table, her hand steady, her posture upright, radiating assurance, a simple act magnified by the precision and mindfulness with which it was executed. Alexander's brow furrowed slightly as he noted the shift, the realization settling that the interaction he had expected to direct was instead being guided subtly by her presence and quiet authority. The cafe seemed to hold its breath, each sound, the clink of ceramic, the muted conversation, the soft creak of the floor, accentuating the calm tension, the unspoken contest of awareness and restraint. Sophia refilled a sugar container with careful attention, her movements seamless, the rhythmic calm of her actions drawing Alexander's focus and quietly illustrating the power of composure and deliberate intent. The light continued to dance across the room, highlighting the soft reflections in the polished surfaces and tracing the edges of her hair and features, emphasizing the clarity and quiet confidence in her demeanor. Patrons moved through the space, engaged in ordinary routines, yet their presence underscored the extraordinary balance of influence Sophia maintained, the subtle command over attention and perception that required no assertion but was undeniable. Alexander shifted, a gesture of tentative acknowledgement, realizing the depth of control and awareness she carried effortlessly, a reminder that authority and respect could be conveyed through presence, intellect, and the restraint of thoughtful action rather than through overt demonstration. Sophia returned to the counter, her movements fluid, composed, a quiet anchor within the room, and Alexander felt the weight of recognition settle, a contemplation of the lesson unfolding before him. That true influence often resides in measured patience, keen observation, and the calm confidence to act without the need for acknowledgement, leaving an indelible impression far stronger than words alone. The golden afternoon light filtered through the cafe windows, tracing patterns across the floor and highlighting the subtle textures of the wooden tables and chairs. Sophia moved with deliberate calm, carrying a small carafe of cream to a table near the window, her hands steady, her posture upright, and her presence commanding attention without a word. Alexander watched, leaning slightly against the counter, his polished watch catching the light, a reminder of the precision and control he was accustomed to. Yet here the ordinary rhythm of the cafe seemed to shift subtly under Sophia's composed influence. The soft strains of piano music intertwined with the low murmur of conversation and the distant sound of raindrops, creating a serene yet attentive atmosphere, as if the room itself were observing the interaction between the two. Sophia placed the carafe with careful precision, her eyes briefly meeting Alexander's, conveying awareness and quiet mastery, a subtle assertion of intelligence and dignity. Alexander shifted his stance, recognizing in her calm movements and composed demeanor a force that did not rely on words or dominance, but on focused presence and the attentive observation of details he had previously overlooked. She adjusted a napkin on the table, a small, deliberate motion that carried significance through its precision, signaling control over her space and influence over the flow of attention around her. Patrons continued their routines, chatting quietly and sipping drinks, unaware of the subtle recalibration of power unfolding nearby, their presence adding texture and depth to the ambient rhythm rather than distraction. Sophia's gaze briefly swept the room, noting the position of every patron, every cup and plate, her awareness of the environment complete, and Alexander could not help but notice the quiet authority she exerted through observation and intent. He opened his mouth to speak, carefully choosing words meant to engage, to assert influence, yet Sophia's composed, measured response and serene expression neutralized any intended leverage, demonstrating that mastery could be exercised without assertion or confrontation. The shifting light from the setting sun accentuated the reflections in the polished surfaces, tracing the contours of Sophia's face and hair, emphasizing her calm, attentive intelligence. Alexander's attention was held, captivated by the subtle power of presence, the quiet command of awareness, realizing that the ordinary motions she performed carried more influence than any strategy or display he had planned. Sophia returned to the counter, her movements seamless and precise, embodying dignity and steady focus, while Alexander quietly absorbed the lesson unfolding, a recognition that respect and authority could emerge not from overt action but from composed, mindful engagement. The soft music, the ambient sounds, the light, and Sophia's deliberate presence combined to create a tableau in which influence was felt rather than spoken, where calm intelligence and unwavering composure reshaped the dynamics of the room, leaving Alexander both reflective and undeniably aware of the power she held through subtle mastery. Sophia returned to her usual rhythm behind the counter, wiping a coffee cup with meticulous care, her movements fluid and deliberate, conveying calm authority without a word. Alexander watched, seated nearby, his posture slightly relaxed but his eyes attentive, tracing her every motion as the golden afternoon light shifted to a softer, warmer hue. The gentle hum of the cafe, punctuated by the soft clatter of dishes and the muted conversation of patrons, created a serene backdrop, emphasizing the subtle power exchange between them. Sophia adjusted the sugar containers and napkins with precision, each small motion deliberate, each detail attended to, radiating competence and confidence. Alexander's gaze followed her, noticing the ease with which she managed the room, how her presence seemed to influence the atmosphere without direct assertion, a quiet command that required no acknowledgement. A soft breeze drifted through the slightly open door, carrying the faint scent of rain and freshly brewed coffee, weaving through the space and accentuating the serene cadence of her actions. Sophia poured a fresh cup of coffee, her hands steady, her attention focused, and Alexander recognized the measured care in every gesture, the subtle intelligence embedded in the way she maintained equilibrium, balancing attentiveness to patrons with awareness of his presence. The piano music in the background added texture, each note resonating in the calm yet charged space, harmonizing with the soft footfalls of Sophia as she moved gracefully from table to table. Alexander's expression shifted subtly, an acknowledgement of the lesson unfolding before him, the realization that influence was not always enforced but could be felt, understood, and respected through composed, deliberate presence. Sophia's eyes briefly met his, a calm, unwavering gaze that conveyed clarity and quiet authority, suggesting understanding and control without a word. The soft reflections of light on the polished surfaces of the tables and the gentle patterns cast across the floor by the shifting sunlight reinforced the visual rhythm of her composed demeanor. Patrons continued their ordinary routines, yet the room's energy was quietly reshaped by the interplay of focus, observation, and intentional movement that Sophia maintained. Alexander leaned back slightly, considering the subtle mastery on display, how the ordinary acts of arranging, serving, and observing carried an extraordinary weight of influence, commanding attention through presence and quiet intelligence alone. Sophia returned to the counter, placing the cup down with precision, her movements seamless and fluid, embodying dignity, patience, and awareness, a testament to the power inherent in quiet, deliberate action, leaving Alexander reflective, attentive, and undeniably impressed by the understated mastery she wielded effortlessly. Sophia moved to the center of the café, adjusting a chair with effortless precision, her calm presence drawing the eyes of a few curious patrons without any intentional display. The late afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting long, soft shadows that danced across the polished surfaces, highlighting the meticulous care with which she maintained the space. Alexander stood near the counter, his posture relaxed yet attentive, observing how every subtle action Sophia took carried an inherent weight, a silent authority that shaped the room without command or confrontation. The soft murmur of conversation, the gentle clink of cutlery, and the faint strains of piano music created a rhythm that harmonized with the quiet tension between them, accentuating the understated power of composed presence. Sophia refilled a coffee pot with deliberate motions, her hands steady and precise, the simplicity of the act elevated by the controlled focus she brought to it, demonstrating mastery not through force, but through intention and awareness. Alexander's gaze followed her every move, recognizing the shift in the usual dynamics, understanding that influence here was dictated by subtlety, observation, and the steady projection of intelligence and dignity rather than by overt assertion. A soft breeze from the slightly open door carried the scent of rain-soaked streets and freshly brewed coffee, mixing with the warm air inside and accentuating the sensory depth of the moment. Sophia's eyes briefly met Alexander's, a calm, unwavering gaze that conveyed understanding and quiet dominance, a recognition of her own control over the interaction that required no words. She placed the coffee pot down, her movements fluid and deliberate, then reached for a cup to adjust its position, each action a silent reinforcement of her careful orchestration of the space. Patrons continued their routines, oblivious to the nuanced exchange, yet their presence underscored the extraordinary control Sophia maintained, the unspoken command that radiated through her composure and awareness. Alexander shifted slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that the influence he expected to wield was being subtly guided and restrained by her steady, measured presence. The interplay of light, reflections, and the soft cadence of ambient sounds emphasized the deliberate harmony Sophia maintained, a testament to the potency of calm intelligence and unshakable composure. She moved with seamless grace to clear a tray, her eyes scanning the room briefly, noting the positions of patrons and Alexander alike, effortlessly balancing attentiveness and presence, a quiet demonstration of authority earned through restraint. Alexander watched, captivated, a mixture of reflection and respect forming, as he realized the lesson in presence, patience, and measured action unfolding before him, the subtle power of dignity resonating through every careful, composed movement Sophia made. leaving an indelible impression that required no acknowledgement yet commanded full recognition. The sun was low now, casting a warm amber glow through the large windows, bathing the café in soft, forgiving light. Sophia moved slowly, gathering empty cups and wiping the counter with the same steady grace that had marked every moment of the afternoon. Alexander stood near the door, watching quietly, a subtle shift in his posture betraying a newfound respect and understanding. The atmosphere felt lighter, the earlier tension replaced by a serene balance, as if the room itself exhaled alongside the gentle cadence of their interaction. Sophia's eyes met his briefly, and in that look there was no triumph, no gloating, only quiet dignity and clarity, a demonstration of integrity that needed no applause. She placed the last cup of coffee back on the tray, her hands unshaking, her composure intact, embodying the calm assurance of someone who had faced scrutiny and emerged with self-respect unblemished. Alexander nodded almost imperceptibly, acknowledging the lesson she had imparted without a single word, the subtle understanding that power is not always in dominance, but in restraint, awareness, and the measured exercise of intelligence. The soft piano notes, the fading light, the gentle chatter of patrons, all combined to create a moment of emotional clarity, a quiet justice that did not punish but corrected through recognition and presence. Sophia began to clear the final table, her movements rhythmic and assured, and Alexander watched as she orchestrated the space around her with unspoken authority, a reminder that true strength often manifests in the ordinary, the unnoticed, the calm. The warmth of the sun mingled with the rich aroma of coffee, filling the room with a sense of closure and peace, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed to pause, acknowledging the quiet dignity that Sophia carried with her. Patrons moved past, unaware of the subtle moral that had been enacted, yet the air held the residual resonance of integrity and respect. Alexander adjusted his coat, took a measured breath, and offered a small, genuine smile, a silent testament to the transformation of understanding that had occurred within him. Sophia's serene expression mirrored the equilibrium she maintained, her eyes reflecting clarity and compassion, the kind that leaves a lasting impression without demand or assertion. The final rays of sunlight illuminated the edge of the counter, casting long shadows that stretched toward the door, signaling the end of the day and the completion of the unspoken lesson. In that soft, amber glow, the room was filled with the quiet conclusion of a story woven through patience, intellect, and subtle influence. The hum of conversation, the gentle clink of cups, the fading piano, all underscored the emotional resolution, the sense that rightness and dignity had prevailed naturally, effortlessly, leaving both the observer and the observed in a state of reflective calm. If this moment spoke to you, take a moment to consider the quiet power in your own presence, and share your thoughts or experiences below, for sometimes the smallest gestures of composure and insight ripple far beyond their immediate stage, shaping the world around them in ways that deserve to be witnessed and remembered.